We're now going to move on to Prime Minister's questions. Now I know why you've been in Lincolnshire. Right, let us start with question 1. Jamie Stone to the Prime Minister.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Jamie Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clearly, the unanimous decision by Highland Council planning to grant consent for the UK's vertical space takeoff in Sutherland is extremely good news. I hope that the Prime Minister agrees with me that this would be extremely good for the local economy of the Highlands, but also would provide a huge opportunity for the UK economy in terms of the international satellite market.
Prime Minister.
Absolutely. I congratulate Launch UK on what they are doing, and as he rightly says, it will create 250 full-time jobs, 130 at the facility in Forres, and I'm no doubt launch the UK on a path to ever greater presence in the global satellite market.
Lee Rowley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday evening, the Prime Minister announced a series of changes that none of us ever wanted to see to keep the virus as low as possible, and residents are understandably concerned and anxious. Would the Prime Minister reassure us all and my constituents in North East Derbyshire that the primary focus of the government remains on protecting both lives and, just as importantly, livelihoods?
Minister.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend can certainly reassure his constituents that our purpose and the purpose of the package that I think carried overwhelming support yesterday in this House is to continue to drive down that R number whilst keeping businesses open and keeping pupils in school.
Now comes the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 3 months ago today, the Prime Minister said test and trace can be a real game changer for us. He was backed up by the Health Secretary, who said finding where people who test positive are is the single most important thing that we can do to stop the spread of the virus. Yesterday, the Prime Minister said the complete opposite. Standing there, he said testing and tracing has very little or nothing to do with the spread or transmission of the disease. Both positions cannot be right. Which one is it, Prime Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it is an obvious fact of biology and epidemiology that, alas, this disease is transmitted by human contact or aerosol contact, but it is one of the great advantages of NHS test and trace, which we did not have working, alas, earlier in the pandemic. We simply didn't have it in the spring, and the result is that we now have the ability to see in granular detail where the epidemic is breaking out, exactly which groups are being infected. That's why we've been able to deliver the local lockdowns, and that's why we're able to tell now at this stage that it is necessary to take the decisive action that we are, and which I think he supports, or he did yesterday anyway, to drive the virus down, keep kids in school and keep our economy moving. That's the point, Mr. Speaker.
Starmer.
So why yesterday did the Prime Minister say that testing and tracing had very little or nothing to do with the spread or transmission of the disease?
Mr. Speaker, I hesitate to reprove the right honourable gentleman for a flaw he seems sometimes to fall into is not listening to my previous answer, Mr. Speaker. I gave a very clear answer. The answer is it is and sadly it is an epidemiological fact that transmission of the virus takes place by a human contact from person to person. What test and trace enables us to do is to isolate the cases of the virus in ever greater detail, which we weren't able to do before, Mr. Speaker. And thanks to the efforts of NHS Test and Trace, many thousands of people, trainees, nurses, doctors, young people, members of the armed services, we're not only testing more capacity, testing more than any other country in Europe, but capacity today is at a record high. And I think you should pay tribute to their work.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I listened to the answer that the Prime Minister gave to the questions. That's why I asked him the question, because yesterday he said the complete opposite of what he said today. Everybody who was in the chamber, everybody who reads Hansard will see it. And he talks about testing. Mr. Speaker, can I remind the Prime Minister that last week, before the Liaison Committee, he admitted testing currently has huge problems. Dido Harding said we plainly don't have enough testing capacity. The Health Secretary said fixing testing would take weeks. Pretending there isn't a problem is part of the problem, Prime Minister. It's unclear, and let's test what the Prime Minister's explanation is. Is the explanation for the problems that we haven't got enough capacity? It says which problem? The problem that he acknowledged 1 week ago before the Liaison Committee. Mr. Speaker, is the explanation from the Prime Minister that we haven't got enough capacity because nobody could have expected the rise in demand? That's the Dido Harding defence. Or is it we've got all the capacity we need, it's just that people are being unreasonable in asking for tests? That's the Hancock defence. So which is it?
Mr. Speaker, I must say I think that the continual attacks by the opposition on Dido Harding in particular are unseemly and unjustified. And I think that her teams have done an outstanding job in recruiting people from a standing start. This is not for a moment to deny the anxiety of those who want tests, which I readily accept. Of course, we would love to have much more testing instantly, and it is thanks to the efforts of NHS Test and Trace that we are not only at a record high today, testing more people than any other European country, but to get to the point that he raised, Mr. Speaker, we're going to go up to 500,000 tests by the end of October. That is the work of Dido Harding and her team, and I think actually, again, what we want to hear, and what I frankly want to hear, is more of the spirit of togetherness that we had yesterday, Mr. Speaker, because this is an opportunity to support NHS Test and Trace. This is an opportunity to get behind that scheme, to encourage people to believe in it and its efficacy. Instead, he constantly knocks it from the sidelines, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry, I think the whip. I'll just say to the whip, there's a little bit of rowdiness coming from here, also from your good self, which I normally never have from you, and we're having a little bit from this side. I want to be able to hear the Prime Minister. When I can't hear the Prime Minister, I do worry about the people who are watching proceedings. If we have further comment, please do so. Speak to me afterwards. Right, where are we up to? Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister knows my complaint is not with the NHS, it's with the government. My wife works for the NHS. My mother worked for the NHS. My sister works for the NHS. So I'm not going to take lectures from the Prime Minister on supporting the NHS. The Prime Minister says we've got capacity, goes on and on about capacity. Let's test that. 3 weeks ago, millions of children went back to school. That's a good thing. Then the inevitable happened. Kids get coughs, bugs, flu. That's what happens. It's in the job description. But there's no effective system in place to deal with it. Many can't get tests quickly. Schools are allocated only 10 tests. Many wait days for the results. The outcome is obvious. Child and siblings off school, mum, dad or carer off work, and in some cases all year groups off school. How on earth did we get into this mess?
Prime Minister.
Come on, Mr. Speaker. He knows perfectly well that, and he'll have read the advice from the 4 chief medical officers that there's an exceptionally small risk to children of primary and secondary school age from this disease. He knows that children have a significantly lower rate of infection. That's all in the letter that they've published today. But he also knows that we are doing our level best to get every child a test who has symptoms, and further, that thanks to the efforts of teachers in this country, of parents, pupils, 99.9% of our schools are now back. And in spite of all his attempts, I may say, throughout the summer, to sow doubt on the idea that schools were safe, the people of this country had more common sense, Mr. Speaker.
Keir Starmer.
Such a poor defence. That's such a poor defence. The point isn't whether the children have got COVID. It's that they've got COVID symptoms, and then they're off school. The government's own department shows that 1 in 8 children are off school this week. That disrupts their education. Whether it's COVID symptoms or other symptoms is nothing to the point. If the Prime Minister doesn't see that, he's really out of touch with families and what they're going through in schooling day in, day out in the last few weeks. The reality is, losing control of testing is a major reason why the Prime Minister is losing control of this virus. As a result, he's phasing in health measures, restrictions which we do support. But at the same time, he's phasing out economic support. Health measures and economic measures are now dangerously out of sync. Let me quote the Director General of the CBI. There can be no avoiding the crushing blow new measures will bring for thousands of firms. It's vital, she says, that all announcements of restrictions go hand in hand with clarity on the business support to protect jobs. Why wasn't that announced yesterday?
Mr. Speaker, let's be in absolutely no doubt that the work that this government has done to protect the economy of this country, to support the jobs of 12 million people through the furlough scheme, an overall expenditure of about £160 billion, has been unexampled anywhere else in the world. And I think he should pay tribute to the Chancellor and his work. And we will go forward with further creative and imaginative schemes to keep our economy moving. And that is the essence, Mr. Speaker, of the plan, of the proposals that he talks about our president. He supported them last night, or he supported them yesterday, Mr. Speaker. I hope he continues to support them. The essence of what we're saying, Mr. Speaker, is that we want to depress the virus, but keep pupils in school and keep our economy moving. And that is the single best thing we can do to support firms across the country.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not asking about the support that was being put in place in the past. We support that. I'm asking about the support that's needed now, particularly in light of the restrictions announced yesterday. Mr. Speaker, this is not theoretical. Yesterday, 6,000 jobs were lost at Whitbread, one of the major employers in the hospitality sector. The CBI, the TUC and trade unions, the Federation of Small Businesses, the British Chamber of Commerce, the Governor of the Bank of England, they're all calling on the Prime Minister to stop and rethink. Support the businesses affected. Don't withdraw furlough. We've been saying it for months. When is the Prime Minister finally going to act?
Well, Mr. Speaker, these are indeed tough times, and I have no doubt that many businesses, many employees are feeling a great deal of anxiety and uncertainty, and we will do our level best to protect them throughout this period. But we will get through this, Mr. Speaker, by precisely the methods that we have outlined and that were agreed upon in this House yesterday. And I may say, I think that the reality of the opposition position has been exposed. The cat's out of the bag, Mr. Speaker, because it was his shadow education secretary who said of the present crisis, she said, "Don't let a good crisis go to waste." That's the real approach of the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, seeking to create political opportunity out of a crisis, out of the difficulties and dangers this country is going through, whilst we are taking the tough decisions. The tough decisions to get this virus down, Mr. Speaker, to keep our education system going and to keep our economy moving. He supported it yesterday. I hope he will, in a spirit of togetherness and unity, that he will continue to give it his support.
Ben Bradley.